Hey, May, why do dragons sleep all day?
Why do they sleep all day?
Because they're too busy fighting knights. Hey, May, why did the dragon cross the road?
Why did the dragon cross the road?
To eat the chicken.
Okay, that one
Hey,
got
May,
me. Yes?
why are dragons easy to weigh?
Why?
They bring their own scales.
Okay, that one was good.
Welcome to UberCube, the
I
podcast.
feel like the bit dragged on.
Dragged on a bit. Welcome to UberCube, the podcast we discuss all things dragons and kitchen table magic, but with refreshments. This is your host, Anthony Adams, a.k.a. Uber Bear, and today we are joined by the lovely... Plug in, insert here.
Stu.
Coffee sipper.
Lovely
Hi,
Stu.
Coffee sipper. Hi. Yes, I'm here. And hi, May.
Hi.
So this is our first recording, fresh off of Uber Cubathon 2025, which was quite the success. May, we missed you. We really did. We tried to populate that Discord so you can see all the pictures. We love you. And everybody's like, where's May? It was an all-day thing. So...
All weekend.
All weekend. Where's May? Where's the fake cube?
Yeah.
What's May doing right now? She's busy. Chasing dragons. So before we even get into this, we're going to kind of have a back to basics type of episode. This is going to be unscripted. We are recording a Sunday before release because it was a beach weekend at the Adams residence. So we are a bunch of tired bears back there, so I'm going to knock this episode out. But before we go any further, we must give a congratulations to our winner of Uber Cubathon, Ben.
Ben went absolutely ham sandwiches. I don't think he lost. He went 3-0, 3-0, 3-0.
I think he lost one little tiny one time.
I think he lost one game. I don't know if he lost a match.
He never lost a match.
No.
He pretty much went undefeated.
Yeah.
So congratulations to Ben. And the vibes, the heads held high type of scenario was just fantastic. Everybody, positivity around the room. And we're going to break that down a lot more. That's not what we're going to focus on today. Actually, we're transitioning over. We had a private event to kind of wind down from the long weekend, the 72 hours of magic, where we had kind of the curators of the event come back to a, clubhouse type deal.
Yeah.
And in said clubhouse, I didn't play as much cube, actually. I played a lot more kind of kitchen table, shuffle up these cards that are unsleeved, no tokens kind of vibe. Chill.
That was Clint.
Our
Okay.
friend Clint.
I
that
wanted
brought the card swapping game.
Listen, I don't know if I've had a more fun and exciting and original and fresh way of playing Magic maybe ever. So Clint's idea is he has this huge box. He shows up and basically says, hey, you want to play this like real old schooly kind of playing Magic? And we're like, absolutely, yeah, let's do that. So he pulls out this box, opens it up. Inside it are 8 felt bags, right? Inside each bag is an old Magic like booster box kind of scenario, right? So you've got Ice Age and Fallen Empires and all that kind of stuff. Inside each of those boxes are 48 cards, and there are 20 like beads that you get to
and
count
most
your
importantly, the little rules books were in each one.
And
of
the
them,
little rules
which
book.
was just like next level.
Absolutely.
And I got to add this: the reason why they're in there because the only rule, the main rule, the number one rule is no internet, no rules,
No rules.
Don't look it up.
No Google.
Kitchen table. Argue amongst
Yep,
yourself.
absolutely.
Which just vibe this thing.
Listen, the vibe was unreal. So I think I got fairly fortunate because I was given a pack with Smokestack and with Jade Mage, and I don't know if I've ever had 6 counters on my Smokestack before, but it did lead to me decking my opponent in game 2, and it was just, even just going back before the games, you build the deck and then you get to go. You take a max of 5 cards to the table and you do a round of trading, and it goes one player, then a second player, then a third player. You've got 3 minutes to trade your cards. You all kind of lay them out in columns on this trade board. And it was magnificent. It was just such a different experience. And I love drafting cube. Like, don't get me wrong, that constantly refreshing, ability to build decks and do new things is wonderful. But that, to me, I can imagine the next time I do that, I was like, you know what? I think I got the red bag last time. Let me try the blue bag this time and see what kind of cards I end up with. And I would imagine he's shuffling them all in, but it was a lot of fun. Okay.
So based on this vibe from Clint's set,
Pure vibe,
which I will include. Clint actually has a YouTube channel, which I'll also include in the show notes.
Absolutely.
I'm zipping this together because it's Sunday. But that vibe inspired me. So I was gifted a wonderful box of Magic cards where I'm going to actually build some other cubes. And kind of the deal is we're going to give it kind of the Boy Scouts type thing and, other kids groups or whatever. Our good friend Jason's a Scoutmaster type thing. So we're going to kind of work that out. But I was sitting there feeling froggy, had a long Friday that I will not go into. But we got a lot of things going on. We got a kid graduating, and we're trying to get him to college.
Oh, yeah.
It's just a lot. So I'm like, you know what? I could use a little bit of downtime, a little bit of me time. I'm going to crack open this box. And so I took a look, and I said, you know what? There are 5 dragons. Included within this were the white dragon, the blue dragon, the black dragon, the red dragon, and the green dragon. And I'm like, there's something here. So I kind of mulled over it on Friday night. I went and poured me a little bit of an old-fashioned, and I stared at these cards and stared at them. And I was thinking, that Sunday Magic that we did right after Uber Cubathon kind of really took me back to my roots of Magic. What am I going to do with this? I'm going to put some rules on myself. So, May, this is where you're going to be chimed in. This is definitely your walk. This is something that you're the expert, the shmee on. Because I'm like, I want to do something that kind of has the vibes of the Fey Cube, but also I absolutely love Dragons of Winter's Night by Chill. And I'm like, what can I do with this box? So this is my restriction. I'm going to work out of this box. I'm maybe going to add 10 cards for my personal collection. I will not order, and I will not scryfall. I'm just going to do like you did when I was a kid type thing, right? I'm going to take it all the way back. I'm going to sit here and look through my collection and go, I want to play against my friends. What type of deck am I going to build today? So,
where do you think you'll play this cube, Anthony? Is there a specific location you might have in mind?
Yeah, so 5 dragons, as we mentioned, right?
Right.
So 5 dragons walk into a bar. That's going to be it.
Ouch. Or,
Let me guess. The 6th dragon ducked.
May, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
She's here all week. Please tip your waitress and try the veal. Yes, very nice.
So I just started assembling cards. And the way I did this was a completely different vibe. So a little bit about me. I do actually embrace complexity in Magic. You and I, Stu and I have talked about this before. We tend to lean towards the machinations, the machine type things, the complexity of Magic. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I just talked about my very complex, well, somewhat complex, smokestack deck that I put together in Clint's box. So that by itself is... there's some complexity in the game style and how you build your deck. And we've talked about you being a degenerate stacks lover and those kind of vibes. So, yeah, I would agree.
So how do I take myself back from the current almost 48-year-old Anthony and let's just wind it all the way back to circa 1996 and when I built decks? Like, how do I get that vibe back? Well, like I said, I put on some music. So somebody asked me what I was playing. I did a little bit of Stevie Nicks, a little bit of Gojira. I was right in the middle of these two, just whatever played. I randomized the radio. And then I did something, May, that I have never done before. Like I said, I didn't do a Scryfall build out first. I went from the bottom up on this idea. I mean, it's a top-down design, as in I let these 5 dragons kind of lead the path of my decisions. But that kind of set my pillars of power. Can you tell us a little bit about your pillars of power? You have this whole thing.
Sure. So, concept behind the Pillars of Power is that you start with a sort of set of cards that you are wanting to centralize your power around. It is not necessarily that these cards are supposed to be like the top end of your power. They're supposed to be at the lower to mid-range part of the cube. So, for example, for a good period of time, I had Sarah Angel and Shivan Dragon. And they worked as pillars because I wanted to craft everything else around it to say, okay, but does Sarah Angel like match up well against this. If you see Sarah Angel in a pack with some of these other things, how do you feel about it, right? It becomes a point of reference for the cube.
I would agree with that, like a grounding point or a waypoint. That's exactly, we've talked about that before. And it does let the drafter during the draft kind of get a vibe of, like you said, they won't necessarily know that where that lands on that bandwidth during the draft. But if they start seeing cards kind of falling a little under or just a little above, it does give them a ballast point. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it gives you a direction, a draft direction. That's always how I've looked at it, right? What's your pillar? And if it's something like Sarah Angel or a Shivan Dragon, then that's, like you say, it's good to have that in that lower to middle power region of the cube. But then I'm looking at, okay, where's the other synergies coming into play, right? Where are the potential power outliers? Where are the potential lower to the ground, more aggressive strategies that could potentially come in? Or, what other archetypes can I look at where I would consider that like a base point of the power? So I like that as a drafter, especially. I love that as a guide to, things like something simple. How long do I expect the games to last, right? If you've got something that's very degenerate and you might expect the turns to last, or the games to last 2 or 3 turns or 4 turns, that's where the power band is. Okay, now I know how to draft and how to strategize. But if the cube is more designed to be in that 5, 6, 7, 8 CMC or 8 mana value, when the real power starts to come in, then again, that gives you a good ability to strategize the draft.
So before we even start going into the dragons and talking about what they do, it's important to kind of understand. I talked about this dichotomy that I have as a person. I enjoy complex magic, but yet I'm putting restrictions on myself. One, I'm building up. I want these cards to be accessible to other players, but also I want to provide, I guess, emergent designs or emergent paths for advanced drafters whilst they're drafting. I don't want them. It's a weird blend, right? And how do I solve that? So a couple of the rules I did is I'm working from this box is my primary kind of thing. I'm just going to look at some of these cards. I'm not going to sift through all of them. I'm just going to kind of take my packs, hold in my hand, flip through and go, that's interesting. And I'm not going to do balancing. I'm not going to do spreadsheet aesthetics on this one. It kind of landed that way a little naturally. We got some 21s and 22s, but I'll get to that shortly. But I wanted no tokens and no counters. That was really hard for me whenever I'm peeling back cards, trying to make a kitchen magic type. I don't want you to bring any accessories. May, do you get that vibe? I want to try to fold into that. I am not quite there with the unsleeving yet. I'll get to you this week and let you know on that one. I don't know where I land on the unsleeving. I saw people just bridge shuffling and all that, and I struggle with that one because I don't want to take those behaviors and transplant them into my other cubes.
I think you're just going to have to embrace it.
I'm going to try. I'm going to try.
You're going to have
That's a hard
to.
one. I'm going to need some guidance. I may end up just doing that. But how do I get what I want from a complexity standpoint, but also get a kitchen table magic feel? Well, I was thinking about this a lot. Again, going back to the Fey Cube, there's 2 very specific mechanics in Magic, or 2 ideas in Magic, that I think find levels of complexity or emergent design while still being clean and simple. And these 2 are, for me, kicker and adventure.
Okay.
Yeah. Even though I said no tokens in May, I did actually put that. I do realize adventure is technically a token. It doesn't feel like a token to me. Do you get that vibe? Are you okay with that one?
I'm pretty sure most people don't use the tokens for adventures.
I ain't got time for that. But these 2 mechanics in themselves do allow like an air of complexity. They let the cards do more. You can play the basic face value of the card and keep it simple if that's your vibe and that's what you want to do. But if you're looking for something more complex, and I don't know what the interactions are going to be yet, this has not been play tested, that's where I believe the emergent concept for maybe you or Stu's drafting this cube and you find lines of play that I simply didn't see. And I kind of want that to happen too.
I think that's definitely part of the organic kind of growth and maturation of a cube, right? So you put it together and then, someone might find some utterly broken interaction between a couple of cards, 2 or 3 cards, and you're thinking, okay, that's not really how I want the cube to go, that everyone is just trying to maybe power draft or look for these couple of cards that can win games by themselves. But complexity is such a crazy term when it comes to, I think, Magic in general, right? So you can look at complexity from a gameplay perspective, right? So there are obviously some decks, KCI combo, maybe Storm, that require a very high level of play at times to be able to navigate, even just your own turns, let alone interaction or any of those pieces. Then there's complexity in the form of lots of additional game pieces / mechanics / sub-game / whatever that can exist in a game, right? So you can think about monarchy and tokens and initiative and all this other stuff that adds to complexity. Sometimes the complexity is just about timing. It can be, do I use this activated ability? Do I play this spell right now? Because the cube is so finely balanced with those timings that by itself is a complexity that challenges not keeping track of all these additional pieces, not keeping track of storm count or how much mana I've got in my pool. It's just keeping track of where I expect my deck to go, where I expect my opponent's deck to go. Sometimes that can be simplified by just understanding the cube to a greater level. One of the reasons why we've always been fairly particular about when we've had our Uber Cubathon events, that we really try and avoid the curator of the cube being able to play in their own cube, because I personally feel that gives a massive example, even just knowing the list can. But those complexities as far as how you're playing the cube can exist just in those sort of microcosms of the draft process, all the way back to the curation process, and all the way through every game and every turn.
So can you go to the overview real quick and let's kind of meet these dragons. Let's do this. This is using May's Pillar of Magic. And there's actually another dragon that I snuck in a colorless one, but we'll talk about that here shortly. But for the pillars, I'm trying to, as I'm doing this, I also put myself on a time threshold. You know, I love me some stew, but I know that sometimes when you try to make a cube right the first time, analysis through paralysis and overthinking and long builds, and I appreciate the long build, and whenever you're ready to release to the public, I'm just going to throw this thing together and we're just going to go. And we'll refine it after post. It'll be marked whatever 147 later, but I'm still going to follow my rules. It's only going to come from my collection. There's a caveat to that. You know, if I order something, you know, it could easily fold into what I own, right? But typically when I order cards, I'm ordering for my other cubes that are prepped for events and whatnot. But
does this include the fact that you are going to use card names that you own, but now you're going to go out and spend more money than your wife would like you to on foiling this whole cube?
I will never foil this cube.
You're going to, and then we're going to play it unsleeved. Okay, just embrace it.
So let's meet the dragons. Let's kind of go through that so you can see this pillar concept. And May, I do appreciate this when you're talking about it. I want this to be transferable knowledge or skills to the audience if you wanted to build your first cube. So really, formatting wise, this is a 180 card cube. You could double this concept once you have your core. And I think I'll give credit to Bones to actually saying that out loud, is to get the meat and potatoes of the cube. And we've talked about that before, right?
Yeah.
Like 180 is a good start if you wanted to go to a 360. Whatever half your cube is, get the core elements of what you want the cube to look like, and then you can kind of design outward from there, right? So my core is white dragon for 4 colorless, and white, get a 4/4 creature dragon. Flying, cold breath. When white dragon enters the battlefield, tap target creature an opponent controls. That creature does not untap during its controller's next untap step. The next one is going to be blue dragon. This is also, the next one's going to be blue dragon. This is 5 colorless, blue for a 5/5 creature dragon. Flying, lightning breath. When blue dragon enters the battlefield, until your next turn, target creature an opponent controls gets -3/-0, up to one other target creature gets -2/-0, and up to one other target creature gets -1/-0. The next one is going to be the black dragon, 5 colorless, and black. You get a 4/4 creature dragon. Flying, acid breath. When black dragon enters the battlefield, target creature an opponent controls gets -3/-3 until end of the turn. Whew, these aren't that bad, but there's still a lot of words. Red dragon for 4 colorless, and red, you get a 4/4 flying dragon. Fire breath. When red dragon enters the battlefield, does 4 damage to each opponent. And then lastly, we're going to have green dragon for 4 colorless, and green, you get a creature dragon, 4/4 flying. Poison breath. When green dragon enters the battlefield, until the end of the turn, whenever a creature an opponent control is dealt damage, destroy it. These are my 5 pillars. And I mean, these are neat pillars. Like, this is a neat way to kind of follow May's kind of footprint. That's what I was trying to do here.
I think the obvious thing that sticks out that, they're not super powerful, right? They are expensive to cast by modern standards, right? They're at least 6 and sometimes 7 mana, which is a lot to spend. You're getting a flying dragon that has an ETB ability, but like you mentioned, May, this is not representative of the top level of the power of the cube. This is just sort of a midpoint.
Right. So, obviously, when it comes to these 5 dragons, I'm a big fan of them because their borderless art is absolutely gorgeous. But what's particularly interesting about them is that while they all kind of have this ETB effect that comes down with, their flavor text, not all of them are quite as, let's say, one for one as you'd expect. So, like, White Dragon freezes things because the flavor of White Dragons are supposed to be that they have a frost breath, right? But it's kind of out of color for White to do a freeze effect, right? But if we go down to, say, Red Dragon is just better Volcanic Dragon, right? Where it's that 4/4 flying haste for 6. Where you're immediately getting that 4 damage the turn it comes down without even having to attack, which is why Red Dragon's obviously like the best among these. But what's fun about this being like a balance point is that you can actually kind of pick what your other flyers and non-flyers are going to be doing around these to make sure that they have like relevant targets and making sure that they feel good to play.
And I feel like you can strategize. Like, I disagree? I don't know. I'm kind of torn as far as which one is the most powerful one. And I suppose this is a brand new cube. This is my first time looking at it, and May, your first time looking at it as well. So in a vacuum, are we saying that doing 4 damage to your opponents immediately on ATB is the most powerful of these because it's the most obvious? It does 4 damage. It doesn't require anything else. Can you envisage just the rest of the cube and think, but maybe the ability to tap on a creature and keep it tapped for a turn, maybe that's the most powerful ability. Maybe shrinking the power of 3 of my opponent's creatures, maybe that could be the most powerful effect, depending on how the rest of the cube is constructed. So I mean, like, how I don't know. I'll ask both of you that. How do you judge that? Like, is that something that you make a determination on immediately when you look at cards like this? Or are you now really focused on those kind of ETB effects as you build out the rest of the cube?
In this case, I was not. This actually just leaned toward, I mean, frankly, I wanted this to...
it flavor?
It's flavor. This leaned into kind of what Chill MTG is doing with Dragons of Winter's Night.
Great.
Where there are powerful dragons in there, but with intent, they're not the most broken, most powerful dragons, right? I wanted these to be really 4/4 flyers, 5/5 flyers, with added benefit that came down one time. I'm not doing the ephemerates and all these. These are kitchen table magic. This is back in the days where Shivan Dragon and Sarah Angel kind of ruled the skies, right? These are kind of an homage to that idea.
Speaking of,
Yes.
Where's your Shivan Dragon?
Well, I actually was debating on that. That is something that I probably will fold into this. I have.
Is it too strong? I'm not kidding.
It is.
Is it possibly?
It is a question because Shivan Dragon is on this, but yes, it's on my kind of maybe board list.
It could be too powerful for this cube. Never thought I'd be saying that in 2025. I've only just looked at the list. Removal is sparse. Let's be honest.
Mm-hmm.
There are some tap effects, but that card kicks rear end. Shivan Dragon.
Oh, it does. And so it's funny you mentioned that. So again, I wanted to go kitchen table. So we've learned a lot. And by the way, I guess we should throw this in here too. We're about to hit 3 years with the podcast, and soon we'll do a kind of an overview of Ubercubathon, and we're also going to do kind of our self-indulgent Ubercube, 3-year mark. That's coming up very soon. I don't know, that's 15th.
May 15th. Yep.
So I wanted to kind of take all the things we've learned from the audience and from feedback and from discussions with May and
our events and CubeCon
and your angry tirades whenever you've done something, invested so much mana and it died for actually doing nothing on the the path to exiles and whatnot. This was in my thought process.
I was going to have a whole episode where I didn't rant about aggro, and you just went and ruined it.
No. There is a tinge. So what I kind of wanted to do is, again, going back to these 5 pillars, the white dragon, the blue dragon, the black dragon, the green dragon, and the red dragon. I messed up Wooburg there. But I wanted to use those as my benchmark for removal. I'm still going to refine that a little bit. So I was thinking about not only the down cube, not only the fake cube, but also some of the interactions you and I've had or discussions where you've kind of come out and said, I spent all this mana doing this thing just to have it knocked out of the sky for, a one cost that basically 2-for-1 me. It
happened one of the very recent times that I drafted, and I'm thinking, okay, look at this cool synergy, this cool little combo, and it was just completely interrupted. My 3 and 2 and 4 mana spells were demolished by 1 mana removal. And that is a heavy investment to make at that stage in the game where Magic has become faster and faster and faster to have combos in your cube, especially if you've got incentivization for other players who are especially familiar with the cube to understand that it's easy for them to interact with some of the more combo-y decks for such a cheap cost. And if all of your removal, or if a lot of your removal is in that 1 to 2 mana value range, it makes it very difficult for me to justify. Like, next time I draft that cube, am I going to want to, if I really care about winning, which most of the time I don't, but if I did, where is my incentive to draft those kind of cards if it's just so easy for everyone else to get rid of them?
Well, that's exactly going back to May's point that with the pillars. I wanted these 5 dragons to be kind of the linchpins of the cube, right? And I do not want to punish people who play those cards by, just playing it and having it instantly removed. So I'm testing some basic math on this idea. And we can throw in sorcery versus instant speed in this conversation. I want it to cost you on the decision to use your removal. I want threats to come down earlier than the dragons, where you have tension points. Do I deal with this, or maybe they have a dragon in their build? I want to take the dragons and use some little bit of magical math here. So I'm going to take a dragon and say it costs 7 mana. I really don't want my removal, my hard removal, my actually kill spells or exile effects. I want them 3, 4, and 5. I want them to not feel like they're unplayable, but I also want them to not, a path to exile versus a 7-drop. I don't want a 1 to 7.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree more. And I am applying the same logic with the Diablo cube. I cannot justify the existence of 6 and 7 mana spells if you can just spend 2 mana at instant speed to remove them. It's just way too much of a tempo swing, and I don't want to encourage players to just flood the board with 1s and 2s and 3s and swing. If that's the case, then sure, I don't mind the 1 and 2 mana, removal spells. But what I don't want is for players to get excited about their big flashy plays, only for them to be removed for super cheap. And I will say this, I am starting to become more and more of a fan of sorcery speed removal. I think instant speed removal, if it's expensive, can be fine, but I don't mind these, even 3 mana, right? 3 mana to get rid of a 7 mana creature, all right, that might be a bit of a feels bad, but if you're forcing the player to have to do it on their turn, that to me is a lot more acceptable than just, oh, you played your 7 mana, I'm going to destroy it at the end of my turn, and then go to my turn and play more 2 and 3 and 4 CMC spells and just run over the game. So I love that philosophy.
So, May, we've said, we've kind of been doing this for about 3 years. And we've learned a lot from the community, right? Even bringing you in and having discussions, we've learned more about curation, but also draft and understanding like the feel bads and happiness meters of your players and tempo and all these conversations we've had. Whenever I was building this, I said I made it simple. I've just got a box of cards literally sitting in front of me, and I'm playing some music, and I'm having an old-fashioned. That's where it was. I put the restrictions on me. I want to work from this collection. I want to kind of let the vibes go. I want to get the cards first, enter them post, into Cube Cobra instead of Cube Cobra like I normally do backwards because the cards are before me. I'm going to see if I can do this as a relaxation type. This is for me, this is kind of a vibe thing. I'm just kind of shuffling through cards going, yeah, that feels right. That feels good. I can do that. But I'm also thinking about a lot of things we've learned over the years, framework wise. Removal, card density, like where do I want my threats to land? Where do I want my bombs to kind of emerge? How do I avoid this idea of something that gives inherent complexity like tokens and like counters? How can I do this? Because this was hard for me. This was real hard for me. Like, how do I turn that part of my brain off and simplify that? I thought to myself, as I mentioned earlier on, both adventure and kicker allow complexity to happen without being overly complex while still being accessible. Do you agree with that, May?
Mm-hmm. It's why kicker and adventures exist so heavily in the Fake Keep, even though the Fake Keep has counters and tokens.
And that's how I avoided the kind of turn creature sideways, because I ultimately would give up on this project if we played it once, and I felt like you made one threat, you turned it sideways, you dominated the game. That's just me talking. Other players may enjoy it, but I won't have a passion about the project. So how do I find a cheeky way of interweaving complexity into the project? Combat tricks. Yeah, 100%. Anything that looks like that. And then kind of, Lucky Paper Radio did a great episode on this, on kind of the texture of removal. And we've talked about this before too, in regards to what's removal look like in a scheme, as far as like, is this hard removal? Because bounce effects, while they might kind of give you that little bit of tempo adjustment or allow you to get in place to actually defend yourself, they don't kill the thing they work so hard for. Stuff like that. There's a lot of layers to this onion.
Yeah, and I will say that removal is always going to be synonymous with removal from the battlefield, right? Either going to the graveyard, going to exile. But you're looking at removal, at least this is my impression, you're looking at removal not from the battlefield, but removal from a threat perspective, right?
Yes.
I'm going to highlight one card. This is an absolute favorite of mine. Gold Meadow Harrier. 1 white, creature, Kithkin Soldier, 1/1, activated ability, 1 white, tap target creature. Extremely elegant. Might look on the surface to be fairly unassuming, but you can imagine in a cube like this where creature damage is how you're going to win with this, right? There is some aristocrat functionality there, so, you can sack things and drain and so on and so forth, but this is going to be one with creatures turning sideways, right? No matter how you slice it.
No matter how I make this complex.
No matter how complex you make it, creatures are still going to win this cube. This is not removal. It's not removing a creature from the battlefield. But you removing a creature from combat every turn, that's a different kind of removal. That's a different kind of consistent value engine or value piece that can, only for 1 mana to cast and then 1 mana to activate, can lock down any creature in this cube. There's no hexproof? Question mark?
No ward? I'm actually in tension with that. Well, now we have a little bit of like, say, for example, Fiendslayer Paladin that has protection from colors targeting it. But I'm very mindful of there is Ward 2, actually. There's Ward 2 with... he's making me jump the script here a little bit that doesn't exist, but I could not put Archive Dragon. You just said that out loud. I fell in love with this card because you fell in love with this card. This card is so neat. Tell them what Archive Dragon does.
It is a neat card.
Take it away, May. Tell them all about this card, because this is just kind of in tune with what I'm doing.
Sure. So Archive Dragon is a 4/blue dragon wizard 4/6 with flying, ward 2, and when it enters the battlefield, scry 2. It is very simplistic. It is very grounded in kind of what you're wanting to do with like top deck manipulation, but in terms of like the draft signals that it is providing, it is saying, I'm going to be winning by big stupid flying bodies rather than having some big stupid thing immediately come down and win the game. Right?
So,
which is why it's elegant.
Going back to this framework, right? Yeah. It's hard to turn off my brain. I want to go to, again, circa 1996, 97, Anthony, and just build a deck back then. But I can't unsee all the things or unthink all the things that we have learned from doing the show, right? Again, back to that blueprint. So I'm thinking about every element of this. I want a certain amount of tap. I want a certain amount of bounce. I want a certain amount of removal that we kind of talked about, this hard kills type situations. Then I started putting in enchantments, and while I'm thinking about it, I'm like, well, I got to have a way to deal with that, but I don't want to add so many countermeasures into this cube that it's unplayable. All this is kind of happening as kind of like a blueprint in my head while sifting through Magic cards. I can't turn that off, right? And that's okay. I mean, it's not just laying cards down and going, I hope this plays well, I hope this sticks. I am literally thinking about everything, but that's part of the kind of the cathartic process of building a cube like this. Again, for the audience, I'm sitting down, I'm like, what do I like, and what do I know that people who play Magic with me like and enjoy? So we've got people who like aggro, we've got people who like aristocrats. How can I intertwine that in? I'm going to put a pin right there. Aristocrats. I said there's no tokens in this cube. They're not as valuable as they once were, right? I mean, they're just not. So I'm not doing like a blood artist. I'm doing a Falkenrath noble. Stu, why am I doing that?
Because it targets.
And it's a 2/2 flyer.
And it's a 2/2 flyer.
That blocks a dragon.
And it's not one of these silly each opponent, commander cards, which, all right, I'm getting off my soapbox now. But yeah, so it's very themeful. It fits in with that. You don't have to have this massive generation of a gazillion tokens to give this card value. And you can pair it. So Anthony's highlighting right now, Vengeful Bloodwitch, 1 and a black for a creature, vampire, warlock, 1/1. When this creature or another creature you control's target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So this is on theme from an archetype perspective. Now I'm thinking I want to start layering these effects, right? I'm like Shrek. I'm like an onion. I got layers. And what's this? Fellstinger, 2 and a black, creature, zombie scorpion, death touch, exploits, and when it exploits a creature, target player draws 2 cards and loses 2 life. I love draining my opponents, and I really like drawing cards.
And so this is kind of, I figured because the games might be a little slower, Aristocrats offered me kind of an avenue of inserting a little bit of complexity into this cube that wasn't exclusively creatures turning sideways for the win, right? I wanted a little bit of layering, a little bit of push. So it let me kind of do that, air quotes, pockets of synergy that our good friend Bill has really kind of talked about often.
Yep.
And how could I find little methods to kind of put that in there? Another one that I kind of did that now that we talked about aristocrats is kind of, I wanted a little bit of reanimator, but I don't want it so you cheat your blue dragon into the yard, entomb it, and then just bring it back out with reanimate. I don't want that.
I'm looking at Dread Return and the aristocrats as Dread Return is my big payoff, and the aristocrats is kind of keeping me alive because Falkenrath Noble is a good card, but it's 4 mana for a 2/2 flyer. If I'm spending 5 or 6 mana for a 4/4 or a 4/6 flyer, then those cards can kind of get run over pretty quickly. So I like to be kept, hopefully alive for a turn or two with those aristocrat strategies, those drain strategies, and then be able to Dread Return something that's going to give me the game-ending, winning piece.
So again, that's going back to this magical math of this cube. Even while I'm sifting through cards and I'm not entering them into the spreadsheet, I am stacking them and laying them out like I'm building a deck. So I'm taking the card and going, hey, that's kind of an aristocrats deck. I'll throw it over here in the aristocrats pile, right? And I can kind of see the curve is not so much something that I was leaning into whilst building this. Kind of did that a little bit post, and it's not perfect. But I wanted to have, how do I get a little bit of sophistication? I wanted Zombify in here, like old school Zombify. Or better yet, Rise from the Grave that has this really sick dragon just kind of emerging from the M10 art. I wanted that too because that was part of my aesthetics. But if you want that dragon back or that thing back that you were doing so much, you're going to pay 5 for it. And this is slower Magic, but you want it, you're going to pay for it. You don't get it cheated out. It's not cheeky, cheat out.
It's not reanimate. It's not exhume.
It's recovery at best.
But it also fits beautifully, I think, with, again, we go back to that mana value and those points in the game where you want to be doing something big and grand and powerful. Something that reanimates at 5 mana, it doesn't have a downside like Animate Dead. It doesn't have a downside like Exhume, right? You've got that singular piece of value that's much more expensive, is isolated to just giving yourself that value, but is not super cheap. You're not doing this in the first couple of turns. That leads me on to another, right, part of the conversation. Again, this is going to be won by creatures turning sideways. Maybe the most powerful dragon isn't red dragon, isn't blue dragon. Maybe it's green dragon. So why do I think possibly that green dragon might be the most powerful? Well, green has, right, and I don't want to accuse you of falling into the trap like people may do with other cubes or even with commander decks. Let's even go there. What is one thing that green is pretty well known for?
Ramp.
Well, it's old ramp, right? Yeah. I got a pretty good idea that if I've got my Llanowar Elves out on turn 1 and then turn 2, I'm able to, ramp for even more. I mean, what's the earliest that I could get old green dragon out there on the battlefield? Maybe turn 3?
Pretty quick, actually.
Pretty
and
strong.
I'm not really opposed to that. I'm okay with these games being a little swingy. This isn't going to be balanced, because when Stu and I are looking at this particular list, red is really strong and green is really strong. And that's okay. That's a lot of where the colors kind of landed with dragons in the collection of cards that I had. There's a lot of dragons in blue and stuff like that that I'd like to introduce into this, but I'm going to actually hold back and not do that right now. I want to play with this as it is, kitchen table this stuff up. I've even got, like in red, Dragon Lord Servant that reduces the cost of dragon spells by 1, because I have that sick art that I kind of wanted to run. It's like that little alternate art, I guess, from the timeline shift they had during Tykeer. And I just thought that was really neat to have in this cube for no reason whatsoever. And then I've got stuff like Dragon Whelp. These are not great Magic cards, but they have like fire breathing and stuff like that. This is like literally how I started playing Magic. What do you think about Dragon Whelp, May, and Fledgling a Dragon? These type cards, I just love them. I love them. I shouldn't, but I do.
So, for context, I also love them, because back when I was first starting to learn about Magic and starting to build decks, I had a deck that was based around the 2-mana version that was the fire-breathing little whelp thing. But what was so fun about it is that it doesn't really matter how big the card actually is, because it's just a way that I could be like, all right, I have nothing better to do, I'm just going to dump all this mana and then just smack you. And that's satisfying. It's fun, right? So I actually do have a very big appreciation for these types of cards, even though that their conditions are a little silly for modern Magic. They're definitely a lot of fun to play with when we're talking like that old school vibe. So.
And again, when I'm flipping through these cards, I'm kind of thinking like, well, what if I, pay 7 and I get whatever dragon out, right? One of my pillars out, or 6 or whatever. And then Stu kills it with murder, which is currently in this cube. May not stay right now. That's my quickest removal, right? There's other variations in here, but it's kind of the quickest, gets them right now, does a direct kill. How do I feel about that? Well, do I need to have haste in here? Do I need to give these dragons haste enablers? I found myself going down a rabbit hole of like, well, I want to have another creature that kind of like gives target creature haste until end of turn, and I want that dragon to go in. And I thought, no, I want this to be about the air quotes Baneslayers and Mold Drifters type conversation. I don't want anybody to be upset because they paid 7 mana for Dragon Mage, which is like a wheel effect when it connects, and it gets removed. But I also don't want it to be able to have a haste enabler, I think, that turn. Because it doesn't feel like Magic when I first started playing, where it just hit the ground running. Because the card inherently says, you invested 7 mana for a 5/5 flyer. Whenever Dragon Mage deals combat damage to a player, each player discards their hand and draws 7 cards. That's what this card promises. This card does not promise that I'm going to pay 7 mana and then give it haste with some Lightning Greaves and you can't interact with it, and now I'm going to reload my hand and I'm going to take a down. I don't want that type of Magic.
You know what I love about this as well is if I'm sitting on the other side of you and I'm looking at this, and I might have me a flyer. I might even have the way to be able to kill this creature when it attacks. Do I want to?
It's tension.
No.
I agree with that.
I don't want to kill it. You know why? I want 7 cards in my hand.
Do you now?
I do. You want to swing and attack me and hit me? I will pay 5. What are you saying? I have to pay 5 life to draw 7 cards? That's a pretty dang good deal for me.
It's a good promise. It's
a great promise.
May, what you got?
So, I think that this is a great card that kind of represents kind of what I mentioned offhand. A lot of your problem solving could be derived from the fact that combat tricks can act as pseudo removal. It can act as, pseudo protection. Because in an environment like this, where turning sideways is pretty much the main way you're going to be winning, being able to have a lot of your interaction points being during combat and taking advantage of a lot of these things is going to be a lot more interactive and complex gameplay, because something like Dragon Mage all of a sudden goes from, I'm swinging at you with this Dragon Mage, And if I jump a bunch of combat tricks into it, then I'm threatening to refill my hand, right?
You're threatening to refill my hand as well.
Yes, you are.
Refill my hand, baby. I want my hands full.
So Dragon Mage kind of offers that little layer of complexity, even though it's not. I know it costs 7 mana to do a wheel and all the things, and it must connect. And it doesn't have trample, but it has flying evasion, which may not mean as much in this environment. How do I keep kind of injecting my own little personal touch to this? Again, creatures turning sideways, I enjoy, but I do have my personal limitations on how much enjoyment I get out of that. Like, I don't want this cube to dry up for our play group either, right? We're building this, as Chris has said before, for us, right? This is for you and I and Chris and Christian to sit around and duel as mages with our dragons, right? How do I inject some sophistication, some layering in here? Something that makes it not feel like, God rest it, love it, the Dumpster Fire Project. It's fun. We played it when Chill was in town. It's fun, but the complexity and layers are not there whenever you're doing certain cards. I wanted to have some thought. So one of the cards that I injected into this environment is the Backdraft Hellkite. For 3 colorless and red, you get a 4/4 flying dragon. Whenever Backdraft Hellkite attacks, each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. This allows some layering, some emergent design, some intentional stuff that you're doing, right? Get back and get that, I don't know, we'll just say Wizard's Rockets or one of these type weird cards.
Looting.
Right.
Chaos Warp. Hello.
It gives you some interesting kind of dynamics to do at instant speed, basically, whilst you're doing it. And I think that's fun. I wanted some layering here. Magic missiles. You see where I'm going with this. Wizard's Lightning. I wanted to have layers. And this is how I get the layers. When on rate, this is literally a 4/4 flyer for 5 mana, which is not ideal, and it has no trample. But to May's point, it allows the games, in my mind, not to be stagnant. Somebody's doing something that gives them, I feel like I'm doing something rich. I'm sinking my teeth into this cube, literally.
Well, yeah, I mean, you've got highlights.
I'm telling you, Backdraft Hellkite, Dragon Mage, bunch of combat tricks. Bam, you have an archetype.
That is actually kind of fun.
Yeah.
I'll put some, I have some archetypes. Right. A little bit of first strike type stuff I think would be neat in here. A little bit of target creature gets first strike until in turn, a little bit of bonus. I think that'd be fun. I can pull that out of the collection exclusively. I will not order cards for this. I've got some more layering here. I want to kind of go to the how Kicker and Adventure kind of gave me what I need out of the cube, right? I wanted a little bit more. And some of these aren't sophisticated cards, but I'll highlight this one in particular here. I'm looking at the card and I'm I don't want to pigeonhole myself into the idea of dragons have to be out. Originally, first thing you said was, hey, is it dragons versus knights? That's what you said.
I did.
And that would be fun, but I feel like the well would dry up for me pretty quickly, right? I'd have humans on the ground, knight versions of it, dragons in the sky.
I've tried this faction versus faction
and
design.
Originally was going to do a typo.
It's extremely difficult when it's 1 versus 1. I feel like if you want to balance that out from a typal perspective, where you've got 4, 5, 6, 7, even 8 maybe different types, obviously there should be some crossover there. That can work, but just having this 1-to-1 battle can be very, very difficult to balance.
Which leads me into a card that I found interesting. I had to I didn't know where I was going with this. Again, I'm playing Stevie Nicks. I'm listening to basically Led Zeppelin. I'm just letting it go random. And I'm well, maybe I should get out of my own headspace. Stop trying to do typal. Because that was the first path I started taking myself down, right? That was so easy to do. What fights dragons? Knights. I want to make this cube a little bit more robust. If I confine myself to those lanes and I make these lanes so tight, am I really doing a service to my drafters? So I incorporated a card. It felt a little weird at first, but it met my personal requirements. Battle Wing Mystic for 1 colorless and 1 blue. You get a creature, bird, wizard, keyword wizard. I'm wizards fights dragons. I can let this come out of my thematic build and still feel good about myself.
We'll allow it.
With Kicker of 1 mountain, flying, when Battle Wing Mystic enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, discard your hand, then draw 2 cards for a 2/1 flyer. This seemed like a card that had a lot going on to me. This lets you go down that avenue of, sure, I got a 2/1 flyer, but what if I splash red with my signets, which I did incorporate?
I saw that.
Yeah, I did that with intent. I
Congratulations.
wanted people to go a little bit. I didn't want to do the talisman. I wanted this to feel a little bit more like you're working for it, right?
And I suppose there is a tension, like a personal tension with a card like this, because you think, okay, having a 2/1 flyer down early on, that's a good aggressive piece, right? I don't think anyone would argue. Having a 2/1 flyer in a cube where creature damage is going to be king, it can get in early damage, it can potentially block something later on in the game, but then you've got that, well, how quick do I want this cube to be? Or how quick is the blue archetype or archetypes, right? Because I'm looking at this thinking, man, it's really appealing for me to be able to just get rid of my hand. Maybe I've drawn some extra lands. Maybe I've been able to dump all the cards out of my hand. And then for just 3 mana, I get to draw 2 cards and get this creature into play. I don't know. I think the cards like that really will come down to how do they feel when they're played.
So you kind of found a little bit of a is it type of archetype. Could you mind highlighting this card here? These are the neat cards that I actually found in the box too.
All right, so this first one is Lojan Dragon's Legacy. 3 colorless and blue-red legendary creature. Dragon Shaman. It's a 4/2 flyer. Whenever you cast an adventure spell or dragon spell, Lojan Dragon's Legacy deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to any target that isn't a commander. We'll Sharpie that last little.
I will. But this type of card allowed that type of emergent design while I'm flicking through it. And I'm like, yeah, it's got a little bit of like, isn't a commander. I could get rid of that. But this was me going into, well, there are a certain quantity, not a massive amount of, say, dragons. There's like 20 of them, give or takes, plus or minus. And there's a certain amount of adventures. You get this for just playing the game, but it allows a drafter to maybe kind of start going down a lane. This isn't intended to be a signpost. I didn't pick this out. It just came up in the box, met the requirement, flying dragon. Is it? Sure, neat. And then I looked at that and I go, oh, cool. Emergent design is now occurring. It also lets me get a payoff for the adventures, which allows me to get that kind of split complexity that I want out of a Magic card. Decision making's modal spells, right?
I think this goes back to what you mentioned about Bill's Pockets of Synergy cube, right? This is right in that lane. You don't have to go absolutely ham sandwiches on all the adventure cards or even all the dragon cards. If you get 1 or 2 bits of power or bits of bonus from that card that is already a 4/2 flyer, already goes toe-to-toe with that mid-level of the power band with the green, red, black, blue, white, right? So a lot of them are at that 4 power. I think there's maybe 1/5. So now you've got a creature that has a persistent value, is something that can give you a little bit of direction during the draft, give you some tension points during the game. I think cards like that, they're fun. Let's just say, there's a fun piece in your cube right there.
So, May, I actually have one for you that I'd like for you to present, and I want to talk this one out. This was kind of, again, when I'm pulling out of this box and I'm constructing, I'm not thinking about all the interactions. I'm doing my own personal version of emergent design. I'm letting the cards take me to where the cards want to go. Again, I'm not like, oh man, I got to shuffle through this. I need to find a card that interacts with adventures and one that gives me kicker reduction. I'm not doing that. I'm literally saying, what is this card speaking to me? What happens? And the one I'd like for you to kind of talk about, if you don't mind, please, is Scion of the Ur-Dragon.
So, Scion of the Ur-Dragon, first of all, extremely ambitious.
I said the same thing.
So
this is
5
not
mana
easy.
for Wooburg, flying 4/4 dragon. You pay 2 colorless to search your library for a dragon card, put it into your graveyard. If you do, it becomes a copy of that card until the end of the turn, then shuffle your library. Which is pretty fun, but it's a bit ambitious.
And
I think
down
that
enough that it's not oppressive.
it is not oppressive at all.
No. Yeah, right. It's a 4/4 flyer that you paid a lot of mana for. Let's start it as a base. But I think, and this may not be a card that lasts. It just won't. I apologize for cutting you off. Tell me what you would do with this card without looking at the list. Like, May, just flow. What would this card represent to you?
Other than 15th pick.
That too.
Other than 15th pick. What this card represents to me is that it is trying to say that we are aiming for kind of some ambitious decks here. We are aiming for, like, kind of the live the dream type feelings that we're getting from these types of environments, where it's just a bunch of pieces that you're trying to make work. And I feel like that this is kind of your Johnny card that's been seeded in here to be like, okay, what dragons are going to come up that I can actually get the full effect out of this with? So once I do get squeeze the lemon, where's the juice, right?
So this is what I'm
And
going
I
to
think
ask you.
that can add a lot of layering for people who are looking for additional complexity in their draft.
This is what I'm going to ask you both to do now that we've kind of unfurled this. Could you do me a favor and filter real quick, both of you? Do advanced filter and look at dragons and tell me what it would become. This is a card that I want to see where your headspace goes. So you have to do advanced. I'm now using Scryfall, and then we're going to go to basically type line. And for anybody that doesn't use Scryfall and use Cube Cobra's feature, you should be. This is really neat. So now we've got the list of dragons, and currently we are looking at 21 dragons, and I could increase that density, but now what would the dragon become? So I'm asking you both to look at this list and see if there's any relevancy here.
So Dragon Mage, we already mentioned that. That one kind of sticks out to me. Actually, even before I talk about that, what about Dread Return?
Yeah.
I wasn't going to take thing that I thought about was Dread Return.
Yeah, I wasn't going to take you down the path of Reanimator. That's where I'm at. But if it became something as it stands without bringing it back, what would you use it as? And so I'll read you the list. Can we just kind of read these without, and I'll try to put these in the show notes. We got White Dragon. We got Eternal Dragon. We have Renari, Merchant of Marvels. We have Archive Dragon, Blue Dragon, Kokusho. That card's gross.
It's absolutely cracked in this environment.
It's cracked. I haven't decided if it's going to stay yet. Black Dragon. It was in the bucket.
Probably shouldn't.
Live on Cultist of Tiamat. We've got Dragon Whelp, and we're definitely not doing that. We also have Fledgling Dragon. Definitely not doing that. We have a Backdraft Hellkite. That has an effect that would be pretty sick if we did it. This is where I was at. Like, what would my drafters want this to become? The one that I gravitated towards was Thraxus the Butcher for 3 colorless and Gruul. You get a legendary creature, Dragon Peasant. You know, dragons should never be peasants, but this one is gross. Trample, whenever Thraxus the Butcher attacks, double the power of each dragon you control until end turn for a 3/4. So even if I don't do the Reanimator function, which I thought about, it's a pseudo entomb, right? It's high costed entomb for a 4/4 flyer. In addition to, I was wondering what other kind of emergent, not about like me building this the cube, but what would the drafter see? What lines? What was worth their time and their investment in games?
I think it depends on where you're at with the game, honestly. Like if I'm short of cards and I want to refill my hand and I want to have some fun, then I can choose Dragon Mage. If you put like fire breathing is at a point where I can win the game, then maybe I want to turn it into that. So I think I'm looking at it as kind of a single use per turn utility creature, right? Depending on where the game is at. Would I draft it? Maybe. I think the difficulty of casting it is what is going to be the biggest barrier to that. Honestly, having Wooburg is going to be difficult. Is the payoff worth it? Maybe. I think that acceleration is going to be a big deal in this cube, and I think green is going to be good because of those kind of what's the 3 mana spell?
Cultivate.
Because of the cultivate.
It's funny you should
effect.
mention that because I also went back to what does the pie do? I wanted to take the pie back to like 1996.
So the pie is what it is. The pie is green is ramping.
That's
Red
why I did that with
is burning and fire breathing. And blue is
light counter bounce.
Counter and some bounce.
Yeah.
White is
kind of aggro. I actually leaned a little bit to get underneath the dragon, so it's got a little bit of a faster pacing with a little bit of lifelink. It's a little bit quicker. Okay. Yeah, that's the intent.
And like I said, the tap effect of those smaller creatures. I mean, that was just one that I looked at, but that's no small thing.
So what's interesting about this design, going back to removing the kicker spells, which I didn't classify in the cube list as color schemes. I just let them land where they're at in Cube Cobra. Maybe I'll refine that later on their base rates. But if we went like from the just straight up Anthony listening to Stevie Nicks and a little bit of Tool while just picking magic cards out, we landed around 21, 22 of each subset of color, with a lot of multicolor that kind of fell in there because Kicker did that to me. But if I just look at the base rates of color, the reason why I was thinking that this Scion or whatever would be interesting, because I think despite all of my rationale that people may land in 5-color soup, it may just happen because the limitations of the fact that this is a 180 cube, there's only portions of the cube, and every color is going to be contested because maybe you don't lean into green, but you lean into green's attributes of, well, I want to explore. And you lean into black's attributes as I want to get a little bit of removal suite. And maybe I want to splash a little bit of red so I can get some removal. I don't know, like, how this is going to land, but because of the scheme of the cube going 5 colors in a 180 cube, typically that'd be a 3-color cube, May. So you get more of a fleshed out pool. That's kind of where
To kind of dispel some of the criticisms, just to make it very clear, I think a card like this is great for this type of environment. Why? Because it matches your goal of trying to create emergent design. This is a card that it doesn't need to be like an immediately powerful card. It can continue to be the 15th pick for a majority of people. However, for one person who's going to be like, I'm going to try to get this into the graveyard as fast as possible. I'm going to try to reanimate it, and then I'm going to try to like use it as an expensive entomb so I can keep reanimating my stuff. So like maybe throw in like a backdraft Hellkite in order to like reanimate something else, right? Like, there are avenues that you can build around this and create cool engines that aren't immediately transparent, but that's exactly why it should stay. Because it's ambitious. It's the live the dream type feeling. And having to go through a bunch of these mental notes of, I'm not sure why this is here, but I kind of want to do something with it. And that's fun. And following the fun is the most important part of a cube.
Stu is having some technical problems in the background, and I'm going to leave this in the episode. His phone, Siri, is 100% listening, giving him meditation advice right now as we speak. So it's fantastic while talking about dragons in a bar that we get meditation advice. So I'm not cutting that.
I want to go back and really, like, not necessarily hyper-focus, but talk about this as a bar cube style, right? You know what else we did during our after party? We drafted a box.
Mm-hmm.
We had our wonderful friend Stephen Conifal, right, friend of the channel, has been supporting this podcast for basically since the inception. Brought along a box of Dominaria United, right? And I will say, it doesn't happen very often. And it's something that I want to make happen a little bit more within our group, is getting some boxes and just drafting, even the cheaper ones, whatever. They can still be fun. But this vibe of just being able to have an environment that you can just take anywhere, doesn't have these external pieces, you don't have dice, you don't have tokens. This is something that I think the popularity of it has grown exponentially over the past few years. And I think something like this that combines that we can just kind of play anywhere. We can sit down on the concrete and just play a game of Magic, and we don't need anything else. We can get little rocks for our lives, as well as being it kind of old school, is what I really love about the vibe of this project.
I would agree. I'm actually excited about launching this one. I'm going to try to bring it this Thursday. Get the first play test, tweak it. Kokoshu's got to go. I agree. I grabbed the card.
Murder.
Well, Murder's probably got to go too, actually. I got 2 cuts already. I knew the cuts when I put them in. Kind of already had the vibe. I'm like, this is against what I'm trying to do with this cube. I want to slow it down. I want to have people have a good time. I don't want it to be so slow that it's so grindy. That's just Anthony talking. But I want to find a nice little, I guess, amalgamation, a little mesh up of what I kind of want from a vibe, and kind of throw it into something. But
I'll say it again. I'll keep saying it. Combat tricks. Combat tricks.
I think
combat tricks.
Well, 100%. Yes. Well, so it's funny you should mention that. I added a lot of the protection stuff in here, like shore up and whatnot, because of things I've learned in the past too. Like, you go to remove the thing, I want you to have counterpoints so you can protect your spells. I want your investment to be protected, and I also limited the removal, extremely limited the removal. So I want to see how this plays out. I'm hoping this is a good time. I hope this lands where the Munson lands.
I hope so too.
Yeah. I might actually go get it and just not sleeve it up and throw some basic lands in there.
I think you should do that too.
Yeah.
There's nothing worth more than $10 in this cube, right?
Questionable,
not
but yes.
Anymore.
Some of the arts, no, they won't be when we're done. But I hope the listeners got something out of this. The gist was, it was hard to turn my brain off while designing this environment, right? All the things I have learned about design, protecting the spells, counter magic, removal, soft removal, bounce, threats, all these ideas. I couldn't turn my headspace off, but I did my best to kind of distill this down to a restriction. And it was really weird not to put counters in here and not to put +1/+1 or some kind of like lifelink token or something, right? So this was hard for me, but this was a learning experience. And I did basically from my living room floor up instead of digital down. This was an experience. And I think people should try this and see how it feels. Like, I encourage people a lot of times not to spend money, but you have a collection. Just try sorting through your collection. Just try to build out like again, pockets of synergy. I've got 3 or 4 or 5 aristocrats. That's neat. Cool. I have a couple of like dragons. Those are my flyers, my big bombs. Cool. I've got a little bit of removal. I don't want to like take away all the fun from everybody. Maybe I'll just kind of limit that on the speed of what that is. There's a lot of like blueprint kind of just if you distill this down. I could talk about this for hours, but I hope the audience learned something from this. It's really fun.
All right, we'll bring it Thursday. We'll crack it on, and maybe in the next episode, we'll just do like a 30, 45-second quick update on just how this first iteration played out and what the feedback was from the playgroup.
All right. Well, thank you very much for guys letting me just rant about my new cube I worked over the weekend. This was an experience. It was relaxing. God, I needed that, and this was amazing.
Maybe I'll do one myself. I have a couple of boxes of just random Magic cards and stuff. Maybe this is a good lesson for people, and I don't know how many other people are guilty of this. I try not to do it anymore, but I do tend to just toss out a lot of commons that I'm not impressed with, or just cards that I think aren't going to hold any value. And maybe this is just a good lesson, like, hey, keep some of those, throw them in a box or a bag or a binder somewhere, and maybe one day you can build a fun cube out of it.
And I'm going to add this one little piece too, because this is part of the promise. I'm actually going to do this again and again with this box, but my whole idea is to actually start donating this towards like the Duke's Children's Hospital or to the Boy Girl Scouts that Jason runs type idea, right? Like, I want kids to start playing this, so I want these designs. I'm going to play this for a little while, and I'm going to give it away. That's my whole idea.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's give away that dumpster fire cube as well, maybe.
That's too easy to give away. Don't.
They won't even take it.
They won't take it. Like, I don't need this in my life.
This is a mess.
All right. Stu, can you take us away to the socials, please?
All right, first of all, again, as we mentioned earlier in the episode, want to give a huge shout out to the victor of Ubercubathon 2025, to Ben. Fantastic job. Just navigated all the cubes so expertly. Had a lot of fun. Everybody who came along said they had a blast. It was a great weekend. And once again, Ben, congratulations on your beautiful Altered Tiger. And we hope yourself, as well as all of our other attendees, enjoyed it just as much as we did. As always, to our Patreons, to Patrick, to Jeff, to Nick, to Chris, to Timber Dragon, to Brian, to Keaton, to Lord Justice, to Nick LaPointe, Preston, and Sam McKenna, a huge thank you to all of our Patreons for the ongoing support. It really means a lot and helps us keep the lights on here at UberCube. As always, if you are ordering cards for your new cube experience, then you can please go ahead and use our TCG affiliate link. It's in our show notes. And you can also get in on the discussion at the Facebook MTG drafting page at facebook.com/groups/MTGcube. You can also support the show by using our inkedgaming.com/UberCube affiliate link. Go get your playmats, dice bags, mouse pads, custom and large volume products available. You can find us at Twitter at UberCubeMTGPod and at Bluesky, UberCubeMTGPodcast.bsky.social. You can reach us via email if you got a longer question or comment about an episode or about the podcast. You can reach us at UberCubeMTGPodcast@gmail.com. As always, come hang out with us on the Discord. And if you're, maybe a YouTuber, looking for some YouTube content, you can find us at UberCubeMTGPodcast 747 on YouTube. Like and subscribe.
This episode was an homage to one of my personal favorite Looney Tune episodes. It was Nighty Night Bugs, where Bugs Bunny and Yosemite Sam, the Black Knight, kept saying, "I hates dragons." And he was rescuing the singing sword. He was the court gesture. This was one of my all-time favorites when I was growing up as a child. Oh my gosh, I loves and hates dragons. And then other than that, we're going to say the thing that we always say here at UberCube is, I hate dragons.
Dragons.
Happy
Happy Cupid.